Thank you, Sarah. Well done. I'm really honored to be invited here to speak to such a distinguished audience on the front row, senior representatives from the former Norwegian Air Force, as I see, guests from the academia, and of course, and that's why I'm really excited, lots of young people from the academy, because you are our future. We are old chaps, yeah, going or seeing retirement in a few months and weeks. Yeah, it can happen earlier as you expect because okay, I can work on this, making a political statement, which I should not do in uniforms, but I will do. You saw that slide talking about solutions. That's fair. I'm not criticizing anybody here, but I'm really angry hearing my own chancellor, my own foreign minister, and hearing my own defense minister talking about military solutions as if there was something besides political solutions. Our understanding, and I think everybody agrees here, is that there should always be and must be a political end state, defined or not defined, but okay, and controlled by politicians. And what we military do, we plan against that and ask for the resources, if needed, to solve it. Yeah, but there is no military solution in itself, and I'm following absolutely what you were saying. But we have to be very careful in our speech and wording into the public, because in the public it resonates that there would be the situation that there are some idiots of generals sitting in Brussels and planning to bomb somewhere people. That's not true. Yeah. You know, and normally the military advice from the generals levels is to be very reluctant. You allow me another comment on something which is in my direct responsibility, which was a bit critical announced. I myself was asked by the SECURE in 2013 to open up a channel to Moscow to talk about exactly what you asked, to come to whatever agreement in the Baltics, especially in the Baltics, to increase safety, security in our common efforts here. Long story short, I was disinvited 3 days before the visit. Yeah, okay. So it always takes two to tango. Yeah, okay. Good. Let's crack on. Yeah, just to highlight, I have to advertise my my enterprises as well here. In the middle, you see my three hats: German Air Ops Command. I'm not standing here as a German general now today. I'm working as the executive director of the Joint Air Power Competence Center, and I bring a few examples as the KO commander, if you agree. Come on. Yeah, we are situated in Kalka-Uedem. It's a very small location in the west of Germany, near the Dutch border. We have about 200 multinational guys from 22 nations. Vikings as well, 10 about. Some are here, right? Okay. And including a Swedish and soon a Finnish liaison officer, so we are perfectly rigged to work very close together here. And of course, 1,100 Germans, but they don't count. Yeah, as background information, the JEPSI is a NATO-accredited center of excellence, the oldest one, the biggest one, and with a 4-star at the top as a director. It's at the moment General Frank Gorenz, who is as well my NATO boss, because he is the commander of Air Command Ramstein. And his other hats are being commander of US forces in Europe and US forces in air forces in Africa. So lots of, yeah, that's air power. really. Okay, you can read his vision and our mission, but let me go to the topic. And I might be a bit boring for the next minutes because I was asked to talk about air power in theory. And the last part of my presentation then will be a bit more examples and going down into the technical weeds, as you might expect. Historically, air power has been associated with its more familiar and visible aspects such as air-to-air combat, strategic bombing, long-range heavy airlift. However, air power has many less visible but equally important missions across the range of military operations, providing close air support, tactical mobility to our ground forces, positioning and resupplying remote forces, providing detailed and timely intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, providing humanitarian relief, projecting worldwide command and control, training of coalition partners in the use of air power, just to name a few. It's nearly impossible to predict precisely how challenges may emerge, and we heard it today, and what form they might take. NATO may find itself caught off guard by changes in the political, economic, technological, strategic, and operational environments. NATO will likely find itself surprised by the creativity and capability of its adversaries. Despite the current relatively low probability of a conflict escalating to a major conflict, NATO should retain the capability to execute conventional campaigns. Peer and near-peer state actors will likely continue to challenge NATO's access to the global commons. Non-state actors and some state actors will likely continue to seek asymmetric advantages. Their objectives may vary from regional hegemony to cultural and religious-driven goals. Accordingly, NATO should maintain the capability to successfully project military power and maintain superiority in all domains. That's very difficult, we will see. Additionally, the nature of irregular conflicts requires patient, long-term commitment to a consistent, coherent strategic and political approach that integrates the diplomatic, informational, military, and economic elements of NATO and partner nations' powers. Here I present you a quite good working definition of air power. You can read it. Air operations are not solely executed with air component forces. Maritime and land forces assigned or attached to operations are likely to include air capabilities and assets that individual component commanders, Army or Navy, may make available for joint air operations in consultation with the joint commander. Oops, there was. When politicians, civilians, or the media thinks about air power, this is the image that comes to mind. And of course, combat power in the form of kinetic capability is very important. Air capabilities provide national leadership and joint commanders with options which may accomplish political objectives without the application of lethal force. Air power can seize the initiative, set the terms of battle, establish a dominant tempo of operations, better anticipate the enemy through superior observation, and take advantage of tactical, operational, and strategic opportunities. Air power is increasingly the first military instrument brought to in order to favorably influence the overall campaign. Frequently, and especially during the opening days of a crisis, air power may be the only military instrument available to use against an enemy. This may be especially true if friendly ground forces are not immediately present in a given region. Air Force assets can secure strategic outcomes at any time by overflying surface forces and thus bypassing geographical boundaries, or striking with precision at the critical vulnerabilities within adversaries' politically political, military, and industrial center of gravity. But air power is much more than delivering kinetic capabilities. Air power has been successfully used to influence strategic political outcomes in many world crises since the Berlin airlift of 1948. Throughout the Cold War and continuing under various international arms control agreements, Air Force assets have been used to observe and verify compliance, leveraging our ability to negotiate and influence diplomatically. Aircraft delivering relief supplies serve not only to alleviate the immediate situation, but also to provide a visible symbol of the care, concern, and capability of NATO and its nations. Through careful building of partnerships, air forces can favorably shape the strategic environment by assessing, advising, training, and assisting host nations' air forces in their efforts to counter internal or external threats. The perception of credible NATO forces underpins many deterrence and assurance strategies. Such activities lead to greater regional stability and security. I have to go back because there's a disorder. I'm not sure who is responsible for it. Probably me. This list of core air power capabilities highlights the flexibility that air forces can provide. Air forces must maintain and present credible deterrent capabilities through successful, visible demonstrations and exercises which assure allies dissuade proliferation, deter potential adversaries from actions that threaten NATO's security, or the populations and deployed military forces of NATO, its allies and friends. Air Force forces can respond rapidly to apply effects. The same spacecraft which are employed to observe hostile territory prior to the outbreak of hostilities provide key intelligence to battle planners. The same aircraft which provide visible deterrence to a potential aggressor can be employed immediately to defend or attack should deterrence fail. The shift from deterrent force to combat power is nearly instantaneous. From ready deterrent to bombs on target is only a question of command and control and flight time. An aircraft dropping a weapon could conduct a tactical, operational, or even a strategic mission, depending on the planned results. Given air power's inherent flexibility, any tactical mission with a given aircraft, whether dropping weapons or relief supplies, can deliver a mix of intended effects at all levels, from tactical to strategic. So that's the theory. Well, sounds good. And now join me in looking more to reality. I think we had this. You know this friendly-looking man already. If he's talking about an air power dilemma, I think he is talking about a European air power dilemma. Not so much about maybe an US dilemma. So what is European air power? You asked me to talk about it. Very difficult. Is it NATO air power minus Canada minus US? Or has it something to do with the European Union? Or is it the contribution of European nations to our common effort to NATO air power, to our common capabilities? I would tend to the latter. General Goerens is concerned about a few things, and this I want to explain you this dilemma in just a few words. About 3 years ago, we were confronted during a conference like this, but in JEPSC, by the following statements and questions by an advisor from the NATO General Secretary. First, he said, for more than 60 years, NATO and the nations could rely on sufficient and prompt air power being available in any crisis. Second, during the last 20 years, most of the European nations have steadily reduced their contributions to NATO's air and space power, some of them drastically. Third, how can we avoid that NATO falls below a critical minimum of available air power capabilities and capacities, and such endanger our stability and future? General Breedlove, who is now secure, he was then the director of the JEPCC, he asked us to start the project. And we called it the Future Vector Project of NATO's air and space power. We first looked into the proof of the statement, whether the ability of controlling and utilizing the third dimension by joint air power really had been the prerequisite for military success in recent operations. Then we asked a number of well-known international experts, at least one is here as well today, to develop ideas and proposals how future risks could be avoided or mitigated. If you are interested in the findings of the so far 3 volumes, there were some copies outside, but not enough, of course, you can look at the website and you will find a lot of good things. Meanwhile, in March 2014, the Russian crisis emerged, and the air power topic found interest by nations to be reflected within the Wales NATO summit declaration. Since then, work is ongoing which should lead to develop a NATO air power strategy and to inform the already mentioned NATO defense planning process with the right inputs to close existing and emerging capability gaps. I hope that the next NATO summit in Warsaw in summer this year will bring even more momentum to our project. Allow me to change my hat for a moment to give you a concrete example, not in the broads, but in the area of my responsibility, of the tool of air power in NATO. You might know the NATO command structure. This is valid since mid-2013, and FOC was reached, it's a paper declaration more or less, end of last year. And I'm sure that you are familiar with the reduction from 2 air commands to just 1, the Ramstein, and from 10 to just 2 KEOCs, the one in Udem, where I have a desk, and the one in Torrejón, and there is a third entity in Poggio Renatico, which is so-called deployable air component command center, control center. There is 2 standing missions to NATO in the air and space domain, as you might know. That's missile defense, which is in the very, let's say, first phases, and a limited missile defense aspect, you know, and the air policing. The term NATINAMS, you might have heard, NATO Integrated Air Defense System, is suggesting that there is an integrated air defense system existing and up and running. What do we really have? We do have in the KEOC Udem air policing area, and I will not talk about the area of my counterpart too intensively because he has a very difficult job there. I have about 100 radars, 16 CSCs, and about up to 20 QAs, partly under national command. There are several national limitations in cross-border operations. The command and control system is still outdated. Connectivity partly relying on open technology from the 60s. And the current NATO system is a peacetime air policing system only. Just self-defense, no REs, no rules of engagement. To better understand what we expect to happen in the build-up of an Article 5 crisis in Europe, I would like to introduce this escalating diagram, and you will find a lot of the statements we heard today depicted here. You see in the very left corner air policing, peacetime, everything is fine. Then the reaction into an enhanced air policing, that is the same rules, no rules of engagement, the same legal background, just doing a bit more and more intensive. And the crisis would start that a nation, or bilateral or coalition, would react to whatever threat, because there is no automatism in NATO. And NATO could decide, for instance, to launch the very high joint reaction force with a limited mission, and this would form a NATO JOA with a very limited footprint. And then at the end, after Article 5, a NATO air defense system would be installed. But as I said, there is a lot things who are not prepared for this, or not automatically going. And I will explain how this could happen, because our more senior friends know that in the Cold War there was a different view on that. But since then, since 1990, we have new NATO members join who were former Warsaw Pact members and never exposed to the idea of NATINATS. NATO nations renationalized partly the air domain, mainly because of the renegade threat, and concentrating on expeditionary efforts. SBET, GBET, ground-based air defense, forces were reduced dramatically and taken out of the integrated system. Airspace management is heavily outsourced to private companies. So no, we do not have a modern air defense system, but a fragmented, nationally caveated, partly outdated air policing system. And people should be aware about that. As we all would agree, and history, recent and ongoing conflicts would suggest, if you are not able to control, use and defend your own airspace, you may be doomed. Again, there is one missing. Sorry if I click here. No, it's missing. The missing thing is what would be the need for an integrated air defense system, and just I read it. A capable, standing command and control system. You can purchase the best assets platforms, F-35. If you have no command and control really to employ it, it's nearly useless then. You need robust, redundant, secure connectivity. You need a 24/7 air surveillance system, redundant. You need airspace management capability, national, because it still is a national responsibility, but compatible to NATO. You need fighters, modern fighters. You need air bases, and you need air-to-air refueling. You need an integrated GBET. You need training and exercise, and you need the proper indications and warnings to be able to dominate the escalation and not do just reaction. As the conference organizers asked me about my views on European air power in my area of responsibility, I would suggest that it should be of the utmost interest of the affected nations to get the air defense question solved, as well on the national side as by relevant contributions to the alliance air defense system. And we heard that this morning. Just relying on the US might not be sufficient or not be accepted. Finally, I want to offer a look at a development of the last couple of years, which is of real concern. NATO Brussels has adopted the situation under the headline Anti-Access Area Denial. In contrast to the situation of NATO air defenses, and we had a very good briefing on that, Russia has put a lot of efforts in developing and modernizing its surface or ground-based air defense. Here's a schematic picture of the Kaliningrad air defense posture, just showing the SA-10 and SA-21 range rings. The big red circles show the expected range of a future long-range missile for the SA-21. But even if you only count the current ranges, here depicted in the yellow and the white rings, a good portion of NATO airspace in the Baltics is under Russian air dominance. And the picture is even worse. If you add the known existing lower range, several layers, and ship-based, surface-based air defense into it. You can argue, yes, this is a defensive setup. But follow the idea which was discussed before, and we have seen it in December 2014. If an SS-26, which is a nuclear-capable twofold system, one ballistic missile and one cruise missile component, would be stationed in Kaliningrad, then the whole thing gets a different quality. Yeah, and all the discussion, I will not go into it. Nuclear, the triad of nuclear levels and the effects and the logic which comes out of it or could come out of it reminds me then of the situation in the 80s, and nobody wants to go back into that discussion. But not enough. The same systematic idea is applying in the Black Sea, on the Crimea. And we saw it just recently in Syria. So that means that quite a number of sorties and missions which are flown by NATO nations in those three areas are effectively under Russian air dominance. Okay, we are all military, we know, okay, there's on the one side the capability, and on the other side the political will to employ. Yeah, we are in a situation where we see this, but what is the effect? And you could see the effect, and that has been discussed, I think, in several, or hinted at in several discussion points before. Yes, we had the Turkish Air Force engaging on an Su-24 in November, I think it was. Reaction from the Russian side was to deploy SBAT, SA-15, I think, SA-21 and SA-5. The effect is now that part of the Turkish airspace is under Russian air dominance. So, and if you now think the recent border violation by a Russian airplane into that scenario, you can see what's happening. Yeah. I would not, because it's a bit sensitive, I would not do it in the open. You can ask me afterwards if you are not understanding what I'm saying here. Yeah. Okay. Good. I think I'm out of time. Sarah is already standing there. So I'm not going into depth into recommendations and proposals and all those things. You can find that on the JEPCC website if you dig into that. There's a whole bandwidth of it. So, but what is my message is really okay. I come back to one of the things you mentioned. As the responsible commander for the Baltic Air Policing, we made very clear to our crews what the professional behavior in this situation is, to be very defensive, to be de-escalating, and so on. And I must say that the Russian pilots are behaving professional as well. So some of the things, and I'm not going to criticize whatever statement here, some of the things which came into the press have been misused to make a point, to make a political point, to direct attention. I'm not saying there was nothing, yeah, but it was, in my area, not as critical as sometimes depicted. Okay, Sarah, you have it. Thank you.